the churches were hit several times. The Orthodox Church was bombed, and the Catholic Church was shelled, and actually snipers killed 2 women literally outside of the gates of the road. For Palestinian Christians, the line has always been a land shared by 2 peoples and 3 religions, especially Jerusalem must be shared by 2 people and 3 religions, shared, not controlled by one. When a Jew comes to Palestine, he's returning. And everyone accepted that. This is what shocks me. Everyone thought, yeah, that's normal, they're returning.
Whereas a Palestinian who's been violently thrown out of his home and is in a refugee camp.
No, we're told we must forget what happened in 1948. We're told we cannot return. Another important reason is the voices of Palestinian Christians. We've been challenging the Christian right in the United States throughout the last years, before the war, by the way. And when we see what's happening right now, I'm not saying the right is shifted. We know the reality in the United States, but to see that it's being challenged now, we're thinking finally,
There are those who say that politics and religion don't mix. One exception to that rule is Pastor Munther Isaac, born in Beit Zahor, or Shepherd's Fields, where the angels came down to the shepherds grazing their flocks with the news that Christ had been born. Pastor Isaac was brought up in the First Intifada. He was used to Israeli soldiers coming into houses. His family car was destroyed. He came to Britain and the United States to study theology, and then embraced a career as a pastor in Bethlehem at first, where I got to know Munther Isaac for the first time. I attended his famous sermons. I read his amazing books, including Christ at the Checkpoint. He developed a kind of liberation theology to describe the predicament of Palestinian Christians under occupation. Since October the 7th, Pastor Isaac has become a global figure, speaking out against what so many people now say is a genocide. And he's just written a book, Christ in the Rubble, and that marks a very famous act he did in Christmas 2023, when he in his church, he didn't just simply not celebrate Christmas, but placed the baby Christ in the rubble as a way of marking the horror going on in Gaza. So how will you be spending Christmas this year, Pastor Isaac?
Well, first, thanks for having me. And when I think of Christmas this year, the first thing that comes to mind is I hope the war would be over by then. It's been 2 years, and we've heard several times of prospects of a ceasefire, of an end to this genocide, and nothing has materialized. And so it's really our hope and desire that the war would have ended by then, and only then we can even begin to think, are we able to celebrate? Are we able to begin talking about the healing of the wounds of our people, of talking even about concepts like peace and hope that are usually associated with Christmas. I can't even, go beyond that until I see that the war has already ended. And that's our hope right now, that by then, in 2 months from now, when we come to Christmas, whether here in Ramallah or in Bethlehem, that the war would have ended.
Can you answer that age-old theological question? How is it that God, a merciful God, who you and we worship, how is it that a merciful God can allow this to take place?
It's a genuine question that people have asked and continue to ask, not just over the generations, but particularly in the last 2 years, given the horrors that we're witnessing on a daily basis in Gaza. However, I think, why are we blaming God? We have to blame ourselves as humans. This is not a natural catastrophe. We're not talking about a hurricane. We're not talking about an earthquake. We're talking about oppression and pain and death inflicted by humans against humans. we have to blame the ideologies we allowed to nurture in our world that are contrary to what God has revealed to us in scriptures about justice, about equality, about mercy, about compassion. God has shown us the way, and we have chosen otherwise. So I would blame humanity. And yes, I understand that in our pain and frustration, and this is a very legitimate thing, we cry out to God in anger, not just in lament, but in complaint. Why don't you stop this? Why don't you come down from heaven and stop this? Because we've seen enough. But I've learned also, in addition to praying that prayer, and I don't have an answer to the why, these are one of the mysteries that we live in. I've learned that rather than continuing to ask this question and looking for philosophical answers, we should challenge one another. That's why I kept saying, don't ask where is God, or why would God allow this? Where is the church? Where is the good people of faith? Where are clergy from different traditions to say this is not acceptable, this is not the way? What can we do to stop it? Let's try to take some ownership rather than simply making philosophical questions about it. And of course, I also believe, and this is what I try to say in the book, this is what I tried to say when we placed Jesus under the rubble when I was pastoring in Bethlehem back then. This was part of a sermon I did, that God suffers with us. God is in solidarity with those who are under oppression. Something we see in Scripture, something we read about, how God sides with the oppressed. And again, in a mysterious way, when Jesus lived with us, he chose that path to the extent that he too was the victim of the violence of empires. He too was the victim of the violence of religious extremism. He too, actually, Peter asked the same question. My God, why have you forsaken me? In other words, why would God allow this? So rather than giving an answer or trying to stop that, he identifies with us in our pain, and I think then empowers us to say, go and do what needs to be done so that this does not happen again. And that's the tragedy of this war, is that we allowed never again to be yet again.
And so you're saying, aren't you, here with that Jesus is there in Gaza today. He has been for the last 2 years.
God is present with those who suffer. And this is not just my words from distance. If you look at, first of all, if you listen to the testimonies of those in Gaza, they're going through horrible time. And I don't want to romanticize their resilience or their, talk about, glorify their, this has to stop. This is beyond anybody's capacity. Yet, they are talking about their faith. They are still praying. Even, not just those in the church, you look at the wider Gaza community, they come from under the rubble saying, Nushkur Allah, thank God, Alhamdulillah, saying statements like, Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakil, we submit ourselves to God. So they don't come out of the rubble cursing or complaining or asking these questions that, we make philosophical arguments about. Rather, they come experiencing that, God is with us. And so I would say, yes, God is precisely present with those who suffer. And if you go throughout human history, you'll find several similar testimonies to that extent. Whether it's in Auschwitz or in other places of horrors, people would say, we experienced God with us. So it's a common human experience of people coming closer to the divine when they go through difficult times.
Now, you talk about, let's hope there's going to be peace soon. And with peace, if we're going to have a solution, a long-term solution, then there must be forgiveness. How can the scale of the atrocities, the slaughter of so many, be forgiven? A
very difficult question, but we must also guard from naive perceptions or understanding of concepts like forgiveness and reconciliation. Because I believe there should be steps towards that. It's a journey. And that journey starts first we need to stop the killing. You can't expect or demand from the victim while he's being massacred to even think of forgiveness. So it's not even the time to talk about this, because we need to stop the killing. We need to stop the overall oppression, not just the genocide, but the long system of apartheid, oppression, confiscation of land, discrimination, everything that's happening here. You have to stop it. You have to stop the injustice before you even begin talking about forgiveness and reconciliation. I also believe that there needs to be a place for accountability. Those who committed crimes must be held accountable. We can't just whitewash war crimes for the sake of peace and say, okay, now we reconcile, we forget that 100,000 Palestinians were killed in Gaza, and that's it. I don't think that's right. I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's just. There must be reparations acceptable for those who suffered loss and injustice. Then we create structures that guarantee equality, dignity for all, that are apart, where there is no discrimination or double standards, equal opportunities. And then we can talk, okay, can we as Palestinians and Israelis come together and learn how to live together and forgive and reconcile? So you can't talk about forgiveness and reconciliation now, in my opinion. You have to end the oppression. You have to end the structures of injustice that exist, and there needs to be accountability along the way.
So what you're saying here is that any proper solution is not what is being offered at the moment by President Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu. It's a solution which brings liberation, brings the end to apartheid, brings an end to occupation, creates a new society.
Can we really expect peace to come from Netanyahu? Let's be real. What's being currently discussed as the peace plan, honestly, the war has to stop. So anything that stops the war right now is good, and we must support it, because we can't expect the people in Gaza to endure more. They have already suffered beyond any human capacity. It's enough. So I don't want to make, analysis and judgments about that plan, other than to say I hope it brings an end to the killing. If you ask me, there are many things that I don't like, that I can't trust in the plan. We've been here before. We understand, we've seen this thing on about stages, and step 1, step 2. We've seen what Oslo happened. Oslo was supposed to last until 1999, and then look where we are right now. So, from distance, we can analyze the deal and see many problems with it, serious problems in it. At the same time, this is what's currently offered to stop the killing. And we have to think of it from this human lens, that the killing must stop. Now, beyond that, as I said, we need to talk about accountability. I can't just accept that, okay, now we have ceasefire and that's it. We can't just, accept to live in a world in which powerful leaders and countries commit war crimes on live. Everyone is watching it. No one's going to be horrified. In fact, we might be even horrified beyond that, if that's even possible, when we discover the extent of the genocide in Gaza. But we've seen horrible things enough to realize this is wrong, this is war crimes. And then to think, that's it, ceasefire, let's talk about peace. To me, it's unthinkable. Are we okay with that as a humanity? Are we okay with the lack of accountability, or with the fact that you can commit war crimes and then go on press conferences and get standing ovations in the Congress. Is that the world we want to live in?
Now, in your returning to your book, you criticize some of the churches for being, one might say, is it too strong, accomplices of genocide? And you talk in particular about Christian Zionists, some of them being a part of a very eloquent phrase, the software of empire. Could you expand on that a little bit?
The term the software of empire was actually coined by Palestinian theologian and pastor Mitri Rahib, who described that empires flourish or expand not just because of their hardware, the weapons, the power they have, the money they have, the fact that they are able to expand, might is right and all of that, but because also they need a narrative, a discourse. And in the case of Zionism, the religious discourse or the theological discourse is an important one. It's actually the main one. And that's why he called it the software of empire. It's mainly the belief that, Jews have a divine right to be in our land today. So what that means is that the act of colonizing Palestine, displacing Palestinians, committing crimes along the way, ethnic cleansing in 1948, what's happening now in Gaza, all can be described as Jews returning to their land. This is how churches speak about it. This is how theology books speak about it. And so rather than describing things for what they are, the colonizing of Palestine, the crimes that happened, you just talk about Jews returning to their land. You talk about theological rights, historical rights. And where do you get that? You say, read the Bible. And this has become an acceptable normative discourse when it comes to Palestine. To the extent that, and that's why I often say this is one of the most deceptive narratives in our world today, one in which a Jew born in Brooklyn, could be to a family from European descent, who knows, is considered to have more rights and can come and live in our land, displace Palestinian families from their land, take their homes, and then it's described as Jews returning to their land. And that discourse, that software of empire, whether it's theology or narrative, has rendered the indigenous Palestinian communities as aliens, as
to put it more vividly still, that person from Brooklyn can just fly into Tel Aviv and come and live in Israel. You can't even get to Bethlehem, can you? Sorry, to Jerusalem, can you?
No.
I mean, it was banned to you as a Palestinian Christian.
Not just to Jerusalem, and we can talk also about how I, as a Christian from this land, can't go to Jerusalem. I need a permit from the Israeli military, and it's not guaranteed that I will get it. Yet, we also need to talk about the fact that we can't build homes, dig for waters, in the vast majority of the West Bank, not the entire historical Palestine. We have no rights to build, to move, to do normal life in our land as indigenous people who've been living here for centuries. But as I said, a Jew born in London or in England or in Brooklyn can immigrate, and they call it returning. And here is the power of the discourse. It's described as return. So how is someone who was born in Brooklyn coming to Palestine returning? And this is where the power of theology comes. They say, look at the Bible. Look what the Bible says. At the times of Jesus, Jews were here. Look at the Old Testament, King David and all of that, which means when a Jew comes to Palestine, he's returning. And everyone accepted that. This is what shocks me. Everyone thought, yeah, that's normal. They're returning.
Whereas the Palestinian has been violently thrown out of his home and is in a refugee camp.
No, we're told we must forget what happened in 1948. We're told we cannot return to our homes from 1948. We're told, not just we're told, we're banned from visiting. You know how many Palestinian refugees who live today in Lebanon, in Syria, or even around the world are not able to come to visit. If they're lucky enough to have a foreign passport from European country or USA, they can come as visitors only and get a visa from Israel. But, my aunt lives in Lebanon. She can't even come and visit because, she doesn't have a foreign passport, only a Lebanese passport. But, her parents were born in Beit Sahur.
Do you get some sense that the discourse in the United States, where the Christian Zionists are so powerful and have such influence with the White House, is starting to change?
I think for the first time we're seeing that theology or narrative discourse being questioned. And we have a strong, serious challenge to that theology and discourse. For the first time, we look at the right and think it's divided. For so long, when you looked at the Christian right or the political right in the United States, it was monolithic, strongly pro-Israel, one voice, everyone without reservations, without hesitation, support Israel, almost without exception. Whether it's for ideological purposes, whether it's for Israel as our ally or for theology. And many in the Christian right or the political right in the United States are openly confessing Christians who believe Israel, we must bless Israel, and all of this Christian Zionist theology. I think for the first time in history, at least to my knowledge in recent history, we're seeing a divide, we're seeing a crack in the wall, we're seeing challenges to that narrative. A big reason for that, of course, is people see the horrors in Gaza, but I think also a big reason is the independent media. So even media personalities who once were part of a media organization like Fox, who then went independent, are speaking more freely now and can challenge that narrative. So we're seeing podcasters challenge that narrative. And I would also add that another important reason is the voices of Palestinian Christians. We've been challenging the Christian right in the United States throughout the last years, before the war, by the way. And when we see what's happening right now, I'm not saying the right is shifted. We know the reality in the United States, but to see that it's being challenged now, we're thinking finally, there is this conversation that's happening in the Christian right or in the political right in the United States.
Moving to Britain, what would you like our Prime Minister Starmer to do tomorrow morning if you became British Prime Minister tomorrow morning? What would you do about policy towards Israel, Palestine, Gaza?
So the step to recognize Palestine, I think that was a good step in the right direction. However, it was way too late because a serious question can be asked right now, a legitimate question. Is that even possible to have a Palestinian state given the amount of settlements and fragmentation that already has taken place in the West Bank?
I think it's something in Area C, which is the bulk of the West Bank.
It's the villages where everything is going on at an enormous rate at the moment. It's 500,000 settlers, whereas against now 250,000, 300,000 Palestinians. And
the division of the West Bank through if the E bloc kind of settlement route happens. So that's why, when I don't want to sound radical here, but to me, any step that lacks accountability or measures of implementation
Are you as staggered as I am that Britain is continuing to supply arms to...
Exactly, that's my point. Unless, so we all know, I don't think there is any politician who disagrees with the statement Israel has been breaking the international law for years. And at the same time, there has been no accountability. Let's take the simple issue of settlements. Israel has not stopped building settlements for a single day since Oslo, before the Oslo, of course. Why hasn't there been any sense of accountability? By accountability, I mean sanctions. Unless, if the United Kingdom or France or anybody wants, if they claim that they are serious about a Palestinian state without imposing sanctions on Israel, weapon embargo, isolating Israel from venues like FIFA, from UEFA, from other cultural...
BDS?
To me, BDS is an ethical choice right now. Because what's the alternative? The alternative is we can break the international law, commit war crimes without accountability. Are we okay with that as a humanity? Are we okay with that as an international community? If we're okay with that, then yeah, go ahead and might is right, do whatever you want, invade Ukraine, annex Canada.
Rewarding Hamas for having committed atrocities, which we all agree they did on October the 7th.
The question of a Palestinian state has long existed before October 7th. To me, it's unfortunate that, and it's by design that they're saying, using these words, that we're rewarding Hamas. Because, let's be real, was Hamas serious about the two-state solution? Hamas was not very serious about the two-state solution. But no, we are not rewarding Hamas. We are recognizing international law and legitimacy. Again, unless it does not matter. The very same laws that they are using to condemn Hamas would condemn Israel much more if we implement them, if we are consistent about implementing the international law. The problem with today's environment is that so many people still believe that everything started on October 7th. And it's becoming hard to even have a conversation to tell people it did not start on October 7th, because everyone will say you're rewarding Hamas, you're justifying violence, you're supporting that, which is, of course, not true. Those who know Palestinian Christian theologians know that we've never been for violence at all. And of course, I can't accept killing children or kidnapping children. We must condemn that. The problem is when we point to the context, everyone shifts the conversation. So are you rewarding Hamas? Are you justifying what happened on October 7th? And it's by design, the shifting of that conversation. It's by design that everyone expects Palestinians to condemn October 7th, Hamas, all of that, because they don't want to talk about the essence of the issue. Apartheid, breaking of international law, oppression of Palestinians, denying us our basic rights. So this is what we're talking about. And the fact that Israel has been denying us our rights without any measure of accountability. And here is, again, it brings us to that's what made me angry when I looked at the so-called peace plan that President Trump supported. I hope it brings ceasefire. But you look at it, all the expectations are from the Palestinians. The reforms from the Palestinian Authority. Have we been breaking the international law? Have we been confiscating Israeli lands? Have we been imposing checkpoints in Tel Aviv and Haifa? Have we been denying people the right to come to their homes, to return to their homes?
So what you're actually saying is you just want the same standards, the same, which are normally set out under international law of fairness, equality, to be applied to Palestinians and to Israelis alike.
And I would like to see measures that impose these, which is why, to me, unless Israel
the international institutions such as the the International Court of Justice, or the ICC, the International Criminal Court, should be allowed to do their work. And so when you see the United States putting sanctions on the ICC, it must appall you.
It points to hypocrisy. It points to complicity in the crimes that are committed. Again, unless you can prove that, or unless you provide an alternative. What's the alternative? Do you have a different body that we as humanity has agreed on? These are the set of laws. And by the way, the international law is not perfect. We know that, okay? It can be, but it's what we have. The alternative is not just chaos. The alternative is might is right. The alternative is states that bully other states, which is what we're saying right now.
So far, we've been talking about Gaza, but let's move on to another subject, which is the predicament of Palestinians, Palestinian Christians in particular, here in what many people in Europe or America call the Holy Land. And I've been traveling through the West Bank into Jerusalem a great deal, and you get the same message from Christian leaders. They think they are the last generation. They think there's an existential threat to Christianity in this country. Is there something, could you explain this feeling?
It's not a feeling, it's being real. We look at facts, we look at numbers. We say goodbye to another family every other week or so from our community, Christian families. People are leaving. People have given up on the prospect of life with dignity in their homeland. They're fed up of wars, of checkpoints, of waiting for hours on checkpoints. People have lost their land. People are fighting for their land. In some cases, people are forced to leave. For example, if Israel does not grant their spouse a visa to live with them, if they have foreign spouses.
I've come across this quite a lot, actually, pastors who they marry a foreign spouse.
Or if you marry someone from East Jerusalem, that's another challenge.
You hardly ever go to see them.
Yeah. So people are fed up with life here. Christians in Bethlehem who rely on tourism a lot are fed up from the unpredictability of the situations. The fact that we can't even work in Jerusalem, go to Jerusalem, which, I still remember when Jerusalem was a 15-minute bus ride from outside of our home to Jerusalem. And we would go shopping in Jerusalem. We would do our Christmas shopping in Jerusalem, and it was 15-20 minutes ride, no checkpoints, one bus, stop at Damascus Gate, walk to the old city.
No, you can't do that.
Of course, no, we can't. There was a time when most educated people from Bethlehem used to work in Jerusalem, whether in churches or in diplomatic missions or foreign agencies. That's becoming very, very hard these days because of the permit system and the complications, and basically because you don't want to wait for hours at the checkpoints just to go to work. So the trajectory of numbers in terms of Christians leaving point to the fact that possibly at this rate, if things continue at this rate, in 2050 we might not have a Christian presence in the Holy Land. It's so scary for us.
With no Christian presence, it's so much at the heart of Christianity. Bethlehem, the birth of Christ, as Nazareth, where he was brought up, and of course Jerusalem, where he was crucified, and where the Christian community has flourished for two millennia. And so you're saying that we can now talk about Bethlehem as no longer a Christian city.
We're talking about Bethlehem as a city of old monuments that point to the fact that something happened here 2,000 years ago and that there has been a Christian presence. And our fear is that it will turn into a place in which only a small number of families and monks, possibly foreign monks, live there to take care of the holy sites.
So Bethlehem is particularly, and Beit Zahor, where you were brought up, they traditionally have been Christian cities, haven't they?
Yes.
Or places, yeah.
Yes, If you go as far as the beginning of the 20th century, Christians were around 12% of the population. And so we were a sizable percentage of the Palestinian community. Places like Bethlehem, Beit Sahur, even Ramallah, where we are right now, had a vast majority of Christians. But also, and right now, let's remember that places like Hebron, like Jenin, like Tulkarem, at one time had Christian presence, churches. Today in Tulkarem, I think there's one household. In Jenin, there is, a handful. Most of them now in Zabab, the village next to Jenin. So what this actually shows is that Christianity can end in certain places. It's not as if we're being hypothetical. Most likely the war will bring an end to the Christian presence in Gaza.
How many Christians are there left in Gaza, do we understand?
We think 500. At the beginning of the war, there was 1,000. At least 50 were killed in this war, directly and indirectly. By indirectly, I mean they were killed for lack of any medical attention. If you get sick, you die in Gaza. Hospitals can barely take the people who are wounded from the bombing and the shelling and so on. So many people died in Gaza, were killed in Gaza because, in normal circumstances, they would go to hospital, receive care, but no.
And some of the, most of the Christian churches,
and of course, some were directly hit. Not just Al-Ahli is the hospital, it was hit several times, actually. The churches were hit several times. The Orthodox Church was bombed, and the Catholic Church was shelled, and actually snipers killed 2 women literally outside of the gates of the road of the church. So they were within the church campus, going from one building to the other, and they were killed by snipers outside of the gates of the doors of the church. And the people who were hiding inside the church, the sanctuary, had to crawl and pull them inside the church under where they were shot at. I mean, horrifying stories I've heard from the story. Why would you do that inside the church? I mean, it was shocking to us when that happened. Same to the bombing of the church. 18 people were killed, including 9 children. That's in the first few weeks of the war. And those who remain in Gaza today, the Christians who remain in Gaza, with 1 or 2 exceptions, they all lost their homes. Everyone lost their home in Gaza, we know this. So where will they live? And once the war is over and there is an opportunity to leave, and we can't blame them, most likely most of them would leave because you have no home. You've been living in a classroom with 4 or 5 families for 2 years, eating cans under every day. All you hear is planes and bombings. I understand if they choose to get out of this trauma and try to just get a space for healing.
Yeah. Moving on from Gaza, so one of the things which the Christian leaders talk about is a deliberate attempt by Israel to basically make it impossible to be a Christian and to attack the holy places. That sounds very extreme. Explain why, if you agree with that, and why they're saying that.
So, had you asked me this question, Peter, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, even I would say 3-4 years ago, I would say we suffer like all Palestinians from the policies of the occupation. We suffer because we're Palestinians. Israel does not differentiate between a Muslim and a Christian. To them, we're Palestinians. Right now, we're talking about targeting Christians. This is new. You wouldn't hear the patriarchs in Jerusalem even using this language years ago. But now, they are using this one. In fact, even before the war, there was a very strong controversial statement by others, not by our standards, controversial, from the heads of churches before the war about they mentioned a systematic attempt or plan to empty Jerusalem from its Christian community. And you've never heard them talk about this. And they were clearly talking about the current Israeli government because the extreme line of that government was evident before the war. The rush of settlements and then the strong tones of exclusivity, this is a Jewish land, and then the attacks on churches and the kind of immunity that these religious groups that attack churches enjoyed. And let's be clear, the problem is not simply radical fringe Jewish groups. And of course, let's be clear that religious extremism exists in all traditions. It's not as if a Jewish problem. But in our case, the problem is the government that supports them. It's the government that gives them immunity. It's the government that funds them. It's the army that protects them. So we've seen an increased amount of attacks against churches, against clergy. Then we've seen a systematic attempt to confiscate or take charge of the property of churches in Jerusalem through legal measures, illegal, you know what I mean, shady deals. And
also great new financial demands.
Yes, and then exactly the unrealistic financial demand, the taxation of churches, and right now there is dispute between, for example, the Orthodox Church and the Jerusalem municipality that led to the freeze of the bank accounts of the Orthodox Church. If the Jerusalem municipality, supported by the Israeli government and Netanyahu, goes along with this plan of taxing churches, that's it. We don't have to wait till 2050 to see an end to the Christian presence. Our church organizations will go bankrupt. We won't be able to employ so many people. Schools will shut down. This is what Israel is attempting to do right now in Jerusalem. And
from what you're saying, that's eradicating the Christian culture, which is still a very strong part of going to Jerusalem. And one of the things which makes it wonderful, all the great the three of the great religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, are somehow, I guess they get on very well.
But let's remember, yes, absolutely. And by the way, for Palestinian Christians, the line has always been a land shared by two peoples and three religions, especially Jerusalem must be shared by two people and three religions, shared, not controlled by one. And that is now not, Israel is not doing that, it's doing the opposite. And to be clear, when you go to the Old City, many, most of the property is owned by Christians, by the churches. So you do that and dismantle the Christian institutions, presence, hostels, church organizations, churches, and all of that. That's it. But going back to what's been happening lately, one of the very serious developments that really worth stopping at is the increased pressure year after year put by Israel on Christian celebrations, festivals, feasts in the Old City of Jerusalem. Most notably the Feast of the Holy Fire, Sept an-Nur, the day before Easter, when light comes out from the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and goes to all over the Orthodox world, but also everyone, even not just Orthodox, celebrate that day. We even get it here in our Lutheran tradition. We get the light and celebrate it. Historically, look at this. This is a tradition that has been going for hundreds of years, at least from the 9th century, if not older than that. And you go and talk to Jerusalem, to older folks, they will tell you that on that day, before Israel, or before 1967, you would see visitors coming from Jordan, Lebanon, Syria to celebrate that day. Jerusalem was a city for all Christians, for all Arab Christians, Middle Eastern Christians. Right now, Israel is imposing very strict restrictions on who can go inside the church on that day. The Orthodox patriarchs say our church can hold 10,000 worshippers. We want people to come and worship. Israel limits the number to 2,000. I mean, what right do you have? Not just, when it comes to telling churches how many people can worship inside.
Who should I write to?
But what right do you have in East Jerusalem? Because it's occupied. Let's remember that.
Let me ask, I'll write. Who's the person to write to? They can't. Israel is blocking worshippers from going to the.
Not just attacking worshippers. I mean, the videos are there on that day when. And I hope we need to explain this. I'm not just talking about my community in Ramallah or in Bethlehem not being able to go to Jerusalem on that day. I'm not just talking about that. That's serious enough. I'm also talking about the fact that people who live inside of East Jerusalem, the old city, the Christian community who live there, are prevented from going to the church, are beaten when they try to go beyond the blockades and go to the church.
When do they get beaten? Just
by the Israeli police.
Israeli police beat Christians. Let's just get this clear. So
watch the videos. Look at them up.
What are the sacred events which they're?
You can't. The church is full. You can't have as many people go inside, and all of that. That security. We can't have so many people go to within the church. In my opinion, all of that is to. In my opinion, what Israel is doing is jeopardizing the kind of identity of Jerusalem, in which indigenous Christians celebrate feasts in big numbers. They don't want anybody to see that. To them, they want Jerusalem as a Jewish city, and because they want to send this image to the world that we love freedom of religion, look, we allow these clergy and monks to celebrate in their churches, most of the time foreign clergy.
How do we reconcile what you're just saying with what Prime Minister Netanyahu said a few days ago, I think, that that Israel is the only place where there's freedom of religion in the Middle East. He cited Christianity.
Yeah, and he said that it's the best place for something like. He's been saying that for a long time, and of course there is political reasons for that. He wants to win the Christian right by telling them we're fighting Islamic religious extremism. He feeds on that polarization. To him, that's what wins him political support in the Christian right. So he has to say it to win support. Of course, he's lying, but we're used to this. And to him, I wonder if people are still buying this now. More and more people their eyes are open. And, it's shameful that he uses us as Christians in this land for such a destructive, evil purpose. And at the same time, it's not as if it's not true. It's the opposite that is true. It's not as if, they're not supporting us. No, it's the opposite. They are pushing us out. But then he can go and lie and say that they are protecting us. And I don't want to even get into the fact that, have you talked to Jordanian Christian leaders? Or go to Lebanon, This claim that he's making, casts as if all Arabs are these evil, radical groups that want to eradicate Christians and Jews, and he is protecting Christians and he is fighting the wars of America for religious freedom and so on. This is part of this software of empire. Again, it's not just the Bible tells me so, but it's the fact that we're fighting a religious war here.
And what ways are individual, you mentioned one of them, i.e. spouses treated bad, made it very hard to live together very often, but what ways do individual Christians and priests suffer as a result of, what ways have you suffered as a result of standing up for Christianity, doing your job basically as a pastor?
So everything, let's remember here that Israel controls every aspect of our lives as Palestinians. We don't have autonomy, we don't have independence, we don't have freedom. We can't build where we want, we can't live where we want, we can't marry whoever we want, we can't, drink water normally we have to. Israel allocates the amount of water that we use. Israel gives us electricity. Israel controls our borders. Everything is controlled by Israel. It's not just, some religious rights that are denied from me. Everything is controlled by Israel. The fact that I have to go through checkpoints just to go outside of Ramallah to go to Bethlehem, the fact that I have to wait for checkpoints, the fact that I need a permit from the Israeli military as an indigenous Christian just to go to pray in Jerusalem. And I only get it as a clergy, but my congregations don't get it. It's unthinkable. The fact that Bethlehem and Jerusalem are separated for the first time in history is unthinkable.
That actually is something which isn't widely understood. So until how long ago, from the moment, from the birth of Christ and well before then, you could go from Bethlehem to Jerusalem
Walking.
It wouldn't take very long.
No checkpoints, nothing.
When did that change?
Second Intifada.
It was the second Intifada.
During the second Intifada. Actually, before that, at the end of the 90s, during the Oslo Accords, that's when we began, seeing these checkpoints and not being able, for example, even to go through Jerusalem from Bethlehem to Ramallah. But then the second Intifada was sort of the excuse, to build the wall and expand that policy of segregation.
It's worth bearing in mind, of course, that wall was declared illegal by the International Court of Justice, wasn't it? In a famous ruling about 20 years ago.
Yes, the wall is about land theft. It's an apartheid wall.
And your book, The Other Side of the Wall, yes, it speaks to this living in a different world, which is where you can't practice really.
And it talks about how walls exist even before they are built, because we Palestinians have been considered to be on the other side of the wall by being deemed terrorists, danger, by being, called obstacle by some Christian leaders and so on. The amount of, dehumanization that happened, because the wall says a lot. When millions of Christian pilgrims visit the Holy Land and go through Jerusalem, Nazareth, Galilee, and then when they go to Bethlehem, they have to cross a wall. What that wall is telling them, you're going into a danger area. You're going in, and actually the Israeli tour guides...
Flashing red sign almost, isn't there? Yeah.
And even the Israeli tour guides would tell them, watch for your pockets. Don't buy things, and so on. So the wall is telling the world, those on the other side of the wall, as even less human. In that first book, which was written, at least 3 years before the genocide, I talked about the dehumanization of the people of Gaza, because back then I couldn't fathom how the world was okay with imprisoning 2 million people, dehumanizing them, denying them dignity, calculating the amount of calories that was permitted to enter Gaza. That's before October 7th. Why was that okay? Because it's been a long way narrative of dehumanizing Palestinians. And now, to our horror, it has led to a genocide, not just the besieging of Palestinians.
Do you sometimes feel that you are the wrong sort of Christian? Because Mr. Netanyahu, he likes the evangelicals.
Yes, I know what you mean. I like to feel I am on the right side of the right kind of Christians.
What privileges do the evangelicals, the Christian Zionists, as they're called, get, which you don't get?
No, but what I mean is that, I sometimes joke when I speak to evangelical church leaders. We have this famous, beautiful verse in Scripture: "For God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son, that whoever believes in Him will not perish but have eternal life." It's a very beautiful verse, but also a very famous verse in evangelical circles. And I always say, I wonder if in your Bibles there is a footnote after the world, that for God so loved the world, and the footnote says, with the exception of Palestinians, except unless they believe in our geopolitical, in our political worldview about Israel. So to many Christians around the world, the test of a good Christian or a bad Christian is whether you support Israel. It's something we even see in Congress members. You must bless Israel. Honestly, really, is that what you're telling me? That the all-merciful, all-loving, or just God conditions his relationship to me as a human being based on whether I bless a secular genocidal state or not? Really? So
this is taught by many of the Christian Zionist churches.
yes, absolutely. So, to me, no, I want to challenge that way of deciding who's a good Christian, who's a bad Christian. And if to them I'm a bad Christian for refusing that logic of I must bless Israel, and so be it. No, I know what I believe in, and I know who Jesus is and what he teaches about loving the neighbor, loving the Bible, being a blessing to everyone, and not that kind of toxic ideology.
We discussed Gaza, we discussed Bethlehem, we discussed Jerusalem. Let's just look a little bit at the wider West Bank. Yesterday I went to Taibe, which has been attacked quite virulently by settlers. I went to the church where the surroundings were burnt. Tell me what's going on in Taibe and how typical that is.
Taibe is one of many Palestinian villages, including Palestinian villages, that has been attacked by settlers. And the fact that Taibe was attacked several times now, and the church or the vicinity of the old church was burned, actually makes us think, are we being targeted as Palestinian Christians? Because again, it's happening over and over. And let's be clear, it's not just the Christian towns, all Palestinian towns and villages, especially in remote areas, are being attacked by the settlers. And if you dare to fight back, even if with stones, you will be shot at, not just by the settlers, but also by the military. That's why I said it's not as if a problem of a radical Jewish settler groups or fringe groups or a few individuals. It's the whole matrix that protects them, and the fact that they have not been arrested or held accountable. Why are these attacks happening? I think it's very obvious. Israel wants to control the majority of the West Bank. And these villages pose an obstacle. So if they can push people from the villages to the cities and then besiege the cities, then they achieve their goal of besieging Palestinians in gated communities, reservation areas. So right now, Ramallah, if you close 3 checkpoints, Ramallah becomes another Gaza, completely besieged from the world. The same with Bethlehem, you close 2 checkpoints. And I'm not talking about the one that takes us to Jerusalem. It becomes another Gaza, completely isolated from the world. So what they're trying to do is cut the kind of line between the villages and the cities by pushing more and more people to the cities, isolating the villages.
One of the things that was really striking about Taibe was that, of course, it's gated now, like almost every West Bank village, and the gates can be put up at any moment and hour. There's no rhyme or reason to it. So they're almost imprisoned in these villages. The only person who can get there at will at any time is the settler, is the local settlers. And speaking with the villagers, they said that since October the 7th, the settlers have been liberated to basically come up to the very edge of the village. Yeah. And one of the most moving things, shattering things, was speaking to a Bedouin family who'd been, since October the 7th, kicked off their land, their whole livelihood taken away, which had forced them closer and closer to the village. And just 2 weeks ago, settlers had come in the middle of the night. 40 of them, I think, invaded their house, taken away their livelihood, their sheep, and beat people up and knocked the farmer unconscious. And it's just unspeakable, actually. Now, it was staying with Taibe, when the surroundings of the church were burnt and the settlers went up there, because it was such a symbolic thing, the patriarchs came. Yeah. And I was talking to a local Christian journalist, who said he asked the cardinal, he said, look, yes, there's been these attacks on the Christian buildings, but what about the Bedouin who've been being under attack for months? So I suppose within that there was an implicit reproach that you were just standing up for Christians. How do you accept that fair comment, or more, you have the common plight of all Palestinians, but also you have the special plight of Christian Palestinians. How do you balance that?
Now, of course, we must protest injustice wherever it happens, especially near us, and we can't just be upset when Taiba is attacked, while Kufr Malik, I think a month before the attack, was attacked, and 3 young men were killed by the settlers and the soldiers because they pushed back on the settlers who attacked them. So I see that and I understand that. And for the vast majority, Palestinian Christians have not just spoken about the plight of Palestinian Christians, but about reality in general. And if we look at what Palestinian Christians, the churches have been doing for the years, our hospitals, our schools serve everyone. When we speak about Palestine, we speak about everyone, not just about the plight of Palestinian Christians. So definitely it's not as if we only cry when Christians are attacked. Having said that, I think when Taiba was attacked, that signaled a very red alarm for us, is that are we now being targeted as Christians? And some will begin to think, are they punishing Christians because they're speaking about what's happening in Gaza, or about, because many things happen in the same time. And so the heads of churches have to show solidarity with their own community. They have to. So that's why they came to Taiba. It's not as if to say Christians are worth more or more valuable, but they have to, because they've been speaking about everyone. But now in this particular incident, especially when a church seemed to have been attacked, they had to come. And to be quite honest and a bit transparent here also, being a pastor has opened many doors for me that my Palestinian Muslim neighbors wouldn't enjoy, can't go to these venues. Many times, in the West, let's be honest, people will trust a pastor to speak about the plights of Palestinians more than they would trust a normal Palestinian. And knowing that puts more responsibility on us as church leaders, that we have to speak. And we have to use this privilege that we have the ear of many in the Western world to speak about the injustices that happen here. And so if it takes for me to talk about the persecution of Christians or the suffering of Christians to bring about the plights of all Palestinians, I'll do it. Because, as you know too well, we don't have those many platforms and venues to speak as Palestinians in the media today. The Zionist narrative has been the dominant narrative. So to me, this puts an added responsibility, and the work of the priests in Taiba, the letters they've written, the visit of the patriarchs, and then the presence of the diplomats actually has shed light in many ways on the problems of the settlers that before that was not addressed, I would say, enough by the international media, and certainly not by Christian circles. And when the problem of Taiba, when the Christian media covered Taiba, of course, they had to realize this is not about Taiba only, it's about the wider problem. So I think we need to look at it in that bigger picture.
By the way, I so much recognize what you say about the work of the churches. I remember going to visit the Church of the Holy Family in Gaza before October the 7th and seeing the welfare work that the nuns did with the local people. And really meeting these nuns, I expect they're still there ministering away.
And they wouldn't leave because they don't want to leave the people they are taking care of, those with disabilities.
Yeah, I would
even
say
now,
that,
and they can leave, but they chose not to leave. And the people they're taking care of are not Christians. So churches are not, known for only caring for Christians.
meeting these women, these nuns, I felt as close to Christ as you can be. Their whole life was completely pure service to humanity. They were living in insufferable conditions, looking after other people who were badly in need. It was a very, very, I've never forgotten it. Just one final question, really, because we're wrapping up. Christ's teaching, of course, he said, turn the other cheek. You must reflect on that. How do you explain that, and what does it mean in the context of the horror in Gaza?
Yeah, I can say a lot about that verse. Its relevance, its importance, and how we can implement it. Even that of loving the enemy. How do we implement it? How do we read it in the context of a genocide? I think that, and I believe Jesus here was pointing us to a radically different and alternative way to that of violence, to that of we can solve problems through force, through violence, and that we must respond to violence with violence. The concept of an eye for an eye, some would say, I think either this is the common phrase, an eye for an eye would leave the world blind. The problem with an eye for an eye is that it's never an eye for an eye. It's always an eye for 20 eyes, 100 eyes, 1,000 eyes. The powerful do whatever they want. This is the concept of revenge. And so I believe that what Jesus was saying is pointing us that we need to show the world a radically different alternative way to that of violence, to that of take revenge. And as difficult as that is today, we need to consider the alternatives. What's the alternative? So now Israel has killed 100,000 Palestinians or so in this genocide. I hope the number is less than that, but we've heard several estimates. What do we do now? Do we kill 100,000 Israelis? Is that the alternative? Is that the solution? Is this the way forward? So I'm all for accountability. I'm all for those who sanction these killings to be held accountable. That's why we need things like the ICC and ICJ, definitely. But then we must come to realization as humanity that we can't continue with this cycle of revenge, and we need to find ways to stop this cycle of violence. Jesus' commandments were not about withdrawal. He didn't say, when someone beats you, you withdraw and isolate. He said, you respond, turning the other cheek, finding ways that are costly, they will cost you, but that will ultimately end this cycle of violence. That's my hope, that we teach enough of this, we promote enough of this line of thinking that violence will not solve issues. Justice will, giving equal rights will, so that we find ways to get out of this horrible, horrible reality. And who pays the heavy price for this logic of revenge and might, and if someone hits you, you turn 5 more cheeks and so on, is the weaker sides, the children, the vulnerable in the societies. We see the result of that logic in Gaza. So it's not a call for isolation, it's not a call for weakness, it's a call to be strong enough to find ways to stop the killing and then hold those who committed that accountable. That's why, again, we've talked about sanctions, boycotting, isolating Israel. To me, that's a form of abiding with that principle. Until Israel abides with the international law and the killing stops, those who committed crimes are held accountable, are trialed and so on. and then we can move forward and create systems of justice.
Well, that's a nice note to end on. It's been a very somber conversation, but it's been a privilege to talk to you, and we can carry on, continue to pray for people who, as we speak, are being bombed and killed in Gaza.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.